Welcome to Sevier Heights. If it's your first time with us online, we're so glad you dropped by. And if you're here to rewatch a past message, you're in the right place. If you have questions about service times, giving, next steps, or if you want to learn more about who we are, click the link in our description or just visit sevierheights.org. Thanks so much for being here. Let's jump into Sunday's message.
Well, good morning. Like Kari said, my name is Doug, and I serve on staff as one of our pastors. And I am excited to start to continue this series by faith that Tyler started in last week. If you were here last week, you know that Tyler did an unbelievable job launching our series. He had clear definitions. He had memorable illustrations. Somehow he scored some cameos from Harrison Ford and Sean Connery. If you don't know what I'm talking about, well, if you miss a week, you miss a lot, okay? I would encourage you, go back and listen to his sermon because it was excellent. And basically his entire sermon was about one question. And that question is, what do we need to know about faith? I mean, faith is such an important part of all of our lives. And he said a statement, he said, for such a simple question, what is faith? It's kind of complicated to answer. And he takes 30 minutes and he just unpacks, this is what you need to know about faith. And I'm going to build on that and carry us forward. And where I'm going to talk to you about, if this is what you need to know, now how do you grow in your faith? And there was one thing that Tyler said last week that has been rolling in my head. And Kari had no idea that when he just told you what Tyler said, it was also the thing that made an impression on me and probably on you. Tyler said this, faith is confidence rooted in reality. Faith is confidence rooted in reality. I love that definition. And this morning, we're going to look at how one man's confidence that was rooted in the reality of God's promises and how his faith is actually still impacting us today. His name is Noah, and he's mentioned in Hebrews 11, just like Abel was last week. And this is how the writer of Hebrews describes him. It says, by faith, Noah, being warned by God concerning events as yet unseen, in reverent fear constructed an ark for the saving of his household. By this he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. Now, when I think of Noah, I think of one thing in particular. I think of a boat. I think of a big boat, specifically what we call an ark. In essence, I remember Noah for something he did. But according to what we have written here in Hebrews, God is a little less interested in what he did, and he's much more interested in what Noah had. What did Noah have? He had great faith. You know, his entire life in this one sentence is bookended by what? By faith. And I think what God is trying to tell us is that what Noah did was actually a result of what Noah had. What Noah did is actually a result of what Noah had. Now the question is, can I have faith like Noah's? I mean, is Noah a one-of-one unique individual that he is unlike us in every way and we can learn nothing from him? Or can we step back, take a look at his life and ask ourselves a question? Are there some things that I can know about Noah that will help me grow in my life today? So to do that, let's slow down and go back to the beginning. Let's go back to the original story about Noah and his life in Genesis chapter 6. So if you have a Bible, you can open it up or you can turn it on and go to Genesis 6. And let me give you a little bit of a disclaimer while you get there, okay? If you choose to read the story of Noah this week, you're going to go back to the beginning of the Bible. And in the beginning of the Bible, there's some stuff that's a little unusual. It's a little hard to understand. For instance, people live hundreds of years at the beginning of the Bible. There are some giants that are walking around on the earth. And it is totally natural for you to slow down and have some questions like, how did people live so long? Who are these giants? How did Noah get all these animals onto this boat without them eating each other? How did he get them on the boat without them eating him, right? My all-time favorite. Where are the dinosaurs? Were they on the boat? Listen, those are normal questions for you to have. And if you get hung up on a question, and you're like, I just need an answer, I want to invite you to reach out and email us so that we can answer that. Our email is tyler.boban@sevierheights.org. He just eats those questions up. He actually asked me to tell you, send them all. Send them all. Not even about Genesis. Send them a Revelation. He loves Revelation. Okay, good. he is absolutely gonna kill me. Cain killed Abel, Tyler killed Doug, right? That's what's gonna happen. So listen, if you ask me any of those questions, I went to seminary. I was trained on how to answer them, and here's how I'm gonna answer them. That's a great question. What do you think? That is pastor code for I'm not really sure, okay? But here's what I think is super, super important, okay? I don't want to let a few things that are on the edge of Noah's life that are kind of blurry keep you from seeing what is absolutely clear at the center of his life. Don't let a few things that can be a little blurry blind you from the things that are absolutely clear in his life. So let's look at what the Bible says about Noah and his life in Genesis 6, starting in verse 9. Here's what it says. This is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, all right? So 4 words that describe Noah's life. Number 1 is righteous. Here's what righteous means. It means he had a right relationship this way with God. Okay, he had a right relationship. He had a right standing with God. And then it says he was blameless. Blameless is this way. It means that his right relationship with God impacted how he lived in the world. His relationship here impacted his relationships here. And then it says that he was faithful, or he faithfully walked with God. That means that Noah had a regular and repeated rhythm in his relationship with God. He had a regular and repeated rhythm in his relationship with God. And then finally it says he's a father. He's a father. It says he has 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Little known fact, most popular boys' names of that time. No, if you're looking for a guy's name, don't go with Ham. Don't do that, all right? Look, if I had to summarize Noah's life, I had to take this and summarize it. You know how I would describe Noah? This way. Noah was a man who was committed to his faith and family. Noah was a man who was committed to his faith and family. And I just want to pause right there, because doesn't he feel a little bit more approachable now? See, that's what I want to be said about me. Doug is a man who's committed to his faith and his family. You know, I've had the privilege of being a teacher of the Bible for quite a while in a number of churches, and I've taught hundreds of times, and I realized, according to my notes, I've never taught a lesson on Noah. You know why? Because Noah's a kid's story. It's something we teach them over in that part of the church on Sunday mornings. It's not a story for in here. And as I've taken time all week and unpacked this, I've realized there's so much about Noah's life that applies right here, right now, to my life, and I hope to your life. Because this is the first thing I learned. I want Noah's legacy to be my legacy. I want people to say that I'm committed to my faith and family. Here's the problem with Noah's life. The world he's living in does not share his values. Look at how the very next verse describes the world that Noah's in. It says, now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and it was full of violence. It was corrupt and full of violence. Here's what we mean by that. Corrupt means sin was rampant. It had infected and affected everyone and everything. It was complete. It was corrupted. And what is the evidence that it was corrupted? Is the world was full of violence. See, violence is the opposite of God's intended design for his creation. When God made Adam and Eve in the garden, he said, I want you to be fruitful and multiply. In other words, I am giving you life so that you can give life. But in Noah's time, people were using the life they've been given to take life. Unfortunately, the events that occurred yesterday and which often occur in our culture remind us this is still a problem we face today. So here's what you could say. If Noah was a man committed to his faith and family, then Noah was a man living in a world that was committed to only itself. Look, if you're in the room right now, and when you leave church, you're going to be the only one eating lunch in your family that came to church. If you're in the room and you go back to work tomorrow and you're the only one who loves Jesus at your job, you go back to your team or you go back to your friend group and you're it. You're the only light in the darkness. You are not alone. Noah was with you. He understands what it's like to try to live righteous this way and blameless this way. It's hard and it's difficult. But what we can learn from Noah's life can apply to our lives to take us back as we go into the world. So let's look at how bad the situation really was on the earth. And to do that, we can actually look and see how God felt about the culture Noah was living in. Just a few verses before, here's what it says. The Lord saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. Look, I think this passage, specifically those two words, regret and grieve, can be very hard for us, almost uncomfortable and scary for us as followers of Jesus, because it kind of sounds like what God is saying here is he made a mistake. But a perfect God doesn't do imperfect things. He doesn't make mistakes. And a sovereign God, an all-powerful, all-knowing God, can't be surprised when creation goes into rebellion, right? So how do we think about this? Well, I think the truth is it's not that hard to understand. See, you don't have to be surprised to be sad. Think about it. Is there a movie that you know that you love? You know it backwards and forwards. You know the characters, you know the plot, you know the lines, you can quote it, right? Is there a movie that you know that you love, right? For me, I think of Saving Private Ryan. That's just a movie I think of, just right off the top of my head, right? And the whole movie is about this young man that a group of soldiers are trying to save so he can go back home and be with his family because he's lost all of his brothers. And at the very end of the movie, you see Matt Damon's character, who is an older man, looking at the gravestone of the man who gave his life so that Matt Damon could have his life, so that Private Ryan could be saved. And Matt Damon's character, he wells up with tears in that moment, and he looks at his wife and his family who's with him, and he says, "Tell me I'm a good man. Tell me I earned it." And he's crying, and she's crying, and I'm crying, and we're all crying, right? And I've seen the movie 100 times. Maybe you're not Saving Private Ryan. Maybe for you, it's You've Got Mail. Another Tom Hanks classic, okay? Maybe You've Got Mail. And you got Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks, and they're talking online, and they're perfect for each other, but they don't know they're perfect for each other. And at the end of the movie, it's time for them to meet, and you wonder, how are they going to respond to each other? And you remember that classic scene, Tom Hanks comes walking over the bridge in the park in New York, and Meg Ryan sees him, and he sees her, and she says, "I hoped it would be you." And she starts crying, and he wipes her tears, and he says, "Don't cry, shop girl, don't cry." And I'm like, "I'm crying, wipe my tears," right? Every time. You know what that tells us? You can know something completely, and you can still feel something deeply. I know it's coming. I know it completely, but I still feel it deeply when it happens. Don't mistake that God was surprised or God didn't know. It just doesn't mean he didn't feel it when it occurred. And regardless of how you interpret those two verses, those two words and those two verses I just read, there's something that's plain and obvious in the text, and that's this. God is very serious about two things. The first is he's serious about sin. He's so serious about sin that he's going to bring judgment on the earth, and he's going to restart humanity. We can't miss that. He's still serious about sin today. He's serious about it in our life, and we need to make sure that we're addressing sin in our life, okay? The second thing that you can't miss is God is also serious about saving, because God made a way to save Noah and his family when there was no other way. And you may say, I just struggle with that because this doesn't feel like grace, because grace is that all men are saved. And I would say that's a very low definition of grace. When you read the Bible, grace isn't that all are saved. Grace is that any are saved. The fact of the matter is God did not have to make a way for any to be saved. And he made a way for Noah and his family to be saved. And that should produce a sense of humility and thankfulness in our lives. So let's pick the story back up. It says in verse 13 that, so God said to Noah, I'm going to put an end to all people, for the earth is full of violence because of them. And I'm surely going to destroy both them and the earth. So make for yourself an ark of cypress wood and make rooms in it and coat it with pitch inside and out. And he's going to go on for about 8 verses and tell Noah exactly how to build this boat. And what happens in this whole little dialogue of 10 verses, 2 things happen that change the world forever. 2 things happen that change the world forever. The first thing is this: God speaks. We see it right there in the first verse. So God said to Noah. Now, this is amazing. The God who spoke light into existence and life into existence enters into this story and speaks to Noah. And he tells him what to do. Don't miss it. God didn't have to speak. He wanted to speak. God didn't have to get involved. He wanted to get involved. God didn't have to make a way, but he wanted to make a way because that's who he is and that's what he's like. Because our God is a God who's there. He's a God who cares. And he's a God who can do it. And then something very important happens. We see that Noah responds to God's voice. Look at what it says in Hebrews 6:22. It says, and Noah did everything just as God commanded him. Actually, this statement is made 4 times about Noah. God speaks, Noah does. God speaks, Noah does. So the first thing that changed human history was God spoke. The second thing that changed human history is Noah listened. Now listen, this is a big conversation. It completely changed Noah's life, okay? 120 years passed between this conversation and Noah's next conversation with God. And in that 120 years, Noah took his money and his time and his talent and he invested it in building a boat. He quit his job and became a full-time boat builder and a part-time zookeeper. Why? Because of one conversation. And I'm not saying he even fully understood the conversation. Can you imagine that he went back and he was telling Mrs. Noah, like, hey, so funny thing happened today. God spoke. And he told me I'm supposed to build a boat. And she's like, well, you know how the HOA is. Like, will it fit in the garage? And he's like, I don't think it's going to fit in the garage. No, it's big. And she's like, okay, so when's this going to happen? How's it going to happen? What's it going to be like? Man, and in spite of all the questions Noah faced, he did something very important. Noah chose to act on what God revealed, and he didn't get paralyzed by what God kept hidden. Noah chose to act on what God revealed. He didn't get paralyzed by what God kept hidden. Now listen, this is very important for my life and yours today, because you might be facing something that you just know God's telling you to do. It lines up with his word. It lines up in your prayer life. Other people in your life that love Jesus are affirming it, but you don't know how to do it. You don't know. It sounds kind of crazy. Be very careful that you don't how God to death in your life. Well, God, how is this? How are we going to pay for it? How's this going? How are the kids going to go to school? How? Instead, step back, and when God tells you to do something, start with wow. Wow, me? Move to how later. Listen, act on what God reveals. Don't get paralyzed by what he keeps hidden. You know how important listening is if you're a parent in the room. Think about it. You have been leaving on a Saturday morning to go run some errands, and you look at your children and you say, hey, when I get back, here's what I need you to do. Unload the dishes, take out the trash, clean your room. Kid's like, got it, yep. You leave, you come back, and what has not happened? Unloading the dishes, take out the trash, and cleaning their room. So you call your son or daughter down, and you go, hey, we need to talk. Do you understand the words? Like, look, did you hear me say, unload the dishes, take out the trash, and clean your room? Yes. Why didn't you do it? Right? And they give you the most positive teenage response ever. I don't know, bruh, right? I have a 15 and a 13. I'm uniquely qualified to give that answer. Here's what they're admitting. I heard you, Dad. I just didn't listen to you. See, hearing takes my ears. Listening takes my hands. Listening involves doing. Hearing just involves receiving. What's so amazing about this moment with Noah and God? God spoke. Noah listened. He didn't just hear. He listened. He did it. So suddenly we lean into Noah's story. And we say, man, I want that to be true about my life. That's the kind of faith I want to have. I want my faith to grow like that. Well, if you want your faith to grow like that, something we learn from the life of Noah that has to be applied in our life is this. Faith like Noah's takes trust. Faith like Noah's takes trust. I didn't read to you the entire description of how Noah was supposed to build this boat. But let me just tell you, it's not a boat like you would want to own because it doesn't have sails, it doesn't have oars, it doesn't have a motor, and it doesn't have a rudder. In other words, you can't control it. It's more of a box than a boat. That's it. Noah is supposed to build basically a box that he, his family, and everything in creation can fit on to be saved, but Noah can't control it. When the flood waters come and it rises, he's at the mercy, not of the waters, but of the God of the waters. In essence, what we can step back and see is, if I want faith like Noah's, I've got to trust in a God like Noah's. I got to trust that he can do it. Let me tell you, if I had to summarize everything that Noah did, it's this. Noah did everything he could do, and he trusted God would do everything he said he would do. That's really what we have to do as our life of followers of Jesus. Like, you want your friend to know Jesus so bad. You want that story of Bryce, that his brother was baptized 3 years ago and then Bryce got baptized. You want that for someone in your life, your dad, your brother, your sister, your mom, your best friend, your son, your daughter. And you can't control them. You can't make them love Jesus, and you're not responsible for that. You're responsible for living Jesus in front of them. You know, there is one more description of Noah in the Bible. It's from Peter. It says he's a preacher of righteousness, or a preacher of condemnation, basically. And what he's saying is Noah's life was an example that people needed to respond to God. But the funny part is we have no sermons from Noah. We don't need a sermon because we have a boat. And every time he put a piece of wood in, and every time he swung a hammer, he was preaching a sermon that says, you need a relationship with my God. But he couldn't control the people that he lived in the world with. And you can't control the people in your life. All you can do is do what God's called you to do and trust that God's going to do everything he says he will do. So let's go on and look. We see 120 years has passed, and it's summarized in one word. Chapter 7, verse 1 says this: then the Lord said to Noah. 120 years. And God summarizes it then. That's it. Then equals time. Lots and lots of time. And that's the second thing we see that strong faith like Noah's takes. It takes trust and it takes time. One author said that faith like Noah's requires a long obedience in the same direction. A long obedience in the same direction. My guess is God's not called you to a long obedience in the same direction that involves building a boat, but it might be staying in a marriage. It might be continuing in a career. It might be in leveraging your life for the good of someone else's. To do that, it's going to take trust and it's going to take time. Here's my challenge. My challenge is my walk with God is less of a long obedience in the same direction, more of a short sprint in a general direction. And I think that all comes down to a statement I heard many, many years ago. And I can't remember exactly where I got it, but I've never forgot the statement. And it's this: the problem is I constantly overestimate the impact I can make for God over a short period of time. And I underestimate the impact God wants to make through me over a long period of time. I constantly overestimate the impact I can make for God over a short period of time. And I constantly underestimate the impact he wants to make through me over a long period of time. So this whole thing, Noah's whole life, his fortune and his family, it's all been leveraged on one conversation with God. It changed everything. And then God steps in 120 years later and he says, go into the ark. Go into the ark, you and all your household. For I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation. Take with you 7 pairs of all the clean animals, male and its mate, or male and female, and a pair of the unclean animals that are not clean, male and female, male and its mate, right? And here's what's happening. It's like that. It's happening. It's really happening. In 7 days, Noah has to take everything that's on the outside of the ark in his life and move it to the inside of the ark. Everything for himself, for his family, for the animals, for the restarting of creation. Look, if I had a 2-week trip to Europe planned, I couldn't get ready in 7 days. He's got to save creation in 7 days. But you know what happens? Look at what, it's classic Noah. Look, Genesis 7:5, and Noah did all the Lord had commanded him. This is the pattern of Noah's life. This is what faith looks like in our life. God speaks, we listen. God speaks, we listen. It says Noah stepped onto the boat and God shut the door behind him. I don't know what that's like. The only thing I can compare it to is when you get on an airplane and they shut that door and you're like, this is it. It's happening. Unless you're in Atlanta airport, then you might get back off. You never know, right? They shut that door and it's, next thing you know, you're flying. You have no control. right? Now, if you're like me, you have to stay awake because if you don't, the plane will crash. So it's just, you have to. But you have no control. So you just sit back and you trust that God is sovereign and that he cares more about your life than you do. So what happens? The door shuts. And I think in that moment, you hear the sealing of the door. And there's silence. And then there's one big raindrop on a wooden roof. Boom. And then another. And then another. And then before you know it, it is a deafening flood of rain on a wooden roof. And it lasts 40 days and 40 nights. And day after day and hour after hour, the rain comes until that boat that was built on your family farm and had been sitting in that same place for 120 years begins to shift under your feet. And day after day, you rise higher and higher, and the air gets cooler and cooler, and your questions get weightier and weightier. And before you know it, you're floating on top of the earth and being weighed down by unanswered questions. How long is this going to last? Well, what's it going to be like next? What is there even going to be a next? And I think in between your questions, you're probably dealing with a series of emotions. Like, God, thank you for saving us. All my friends, they're gone. I don't know why you saved us, but thank you for saving me. And you have this deep thankfulness followed by real humility. Why me? I wouldn't choose me. Why me? And then you're followed by one more thing, a real urgency. God, if I ever get off this boat and you ever give me a chance, I will spend my life telling people they need a relationship with you. And those three responses they had to being saved in a boat is the same three responses we have being saved by a cross. We look and we say, God, why? I don't know why, but thank you. God, I wouldn't choose me, but thank you for calling me to be your son or your daughter. And God, give me an urgency to tell other people about this. So it says they floated on top of the earth for basically 150 days, and then they made some landfall. The boat became lodged in the mountains of Ararat, or some people say the Mount of Ararat. And what happens, the boat stays there for another 150 days. And you think this is kind of over, but look what Genesis 8:1 says. It says, but God remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the livestock that were with him in the ark. And God made a wind blow over the earth and the waters subsided. So they sat there on the side of this mountain in their boat, not going out, not knowing what to do next, doing the hardest thing we can do in life, waiting. They actively waited for God until finally in verse 16, he says this, God told Noah, go out from the ark, you and your wife and your sons' wives with you. It's time. It's been 1 year since your feet stepped off dry ground. It's time to step back on it. And the funny thing is there's really nothing else that God says to Noah in the next few verses. So Noah steps off the boat, and if he's just like you and just like me and just like we would think in a movie, he steps onto dry ground and you think he's going to fall and what? Kiss the earth. But he doesn't fall and kiss the earth. He falls and he digs the earth. The first thing he does is he starts collecting rocks and stones and he builds an altar. And he says, we are going to give an offering to God. God didn't tell him to do this. He says, we're going to give an offering to God. Now we know he had more than 2 sheep on this boat, but he didn't have a lot. He wasn't sheep wealthy, right? And I have to think he's saying to his son, hey, Ham, go give me a sheep. And the boys probably were like, okay, listen, Dad, we love your heart. This is a sweet gesture. It's a sweet act. But Dad, we don't know this new world. What if there's some sort of disease that wipes out our sheep? Or what if the lions remember their lions and they do what lions do to sheep? Or what if the sheep just run off? And you know what I think Noah decided in his heart? Noah would rather live without sheep than live without thanking God. Noah would rather live without sheep. He'd rather be in a world without sheep than a world where he couldn't thank God for what he had done for he and his family. Because to Noah, worship was worth it. And that's what it's like for you and me right now. God's saying, hey, I've given you all this. Do you want to respond? And I'll just remind you, God didn't tell Noah to build this altar, but Noah just knew in his heart he should. And you know what happens? The Bible says that when he burned those animals on the altar, that it was a pleasing aroma to God. The smell of the offering pleased God. How did Noah know how to do this? Remember, I said 4 times in his life, it says, God said and Noah did. God said and Noah did. And I think we learned something really important about our life, and it's this. You ready? Obedience to God's voice can give you intuition about God's heart. Obedience to God's voice can give you intuition about God's heart. Right now, if you're stuck, you're in here and you're like, I don't know what to do next. I don't know. God, what do you want me to do next? I won't howl you to death. I won't. Just tell me. Just tell me. He may be saying, hey, I'm not super interested in what I want you to do next. I'd really like you to do what I told you to do now. Like if you want intuition about God's heart, one of the best things you can do is be obedient to his command. Be obedient to what he's told you to do. So God responds by feeling this sense of pleasure, and then God makes a promise. But not a promise like you make or a promise I make, like I promise you this if you promise me that. God makes a promise from himself to himself, and we're the recipients. He says, I promise I will never destroy the earth again the way it was destroyed this time. And as a reminder of my promise to myself that you're the recipients of, I'm gonna put a rainbow in the sky. And every time you see a rainbow, I want you to remember I'm a promise-making and a promise-keeping God, and you can trust me. Why? Because he's there, he cares, and he can do it. And then the next thing he does is he looks at Noah and his family and he gives them a purpose. He says, look, you've pleased me. I've made you a promise, now I'm gonna give you a purpose. And this purpose is an old command in a new setting. He looks at them and says, I want you to be fruitful and I want you to multiply. I want you to be fruitful and multiply. In other words, here's what God is saying. I want you to use your relationship with each other to make people who have a relationship with me. I want you to use your relationship with each other to make people that have a relationship with me. Look, that's still true for us today. Not just for our children, that we physically have the joy of creation, but for people that we help spiritually experience recreation in their life. God wants us to use the life he's giving us to bring life to others. So we started our time together with a simple question. What can we learn from Noah's life that will help us grow in our faith today? And I hope right now you feel encouraged and equipped to continue in your growth. Because Noah's life is a reminder that God is committed to us even more than we're committed to ourselves. And if we'll just do what he's telling us to do, he'll do everything he promised he would do. But here's the hard truth about faith. If you want faith like Noah's, you might have to face something like Noah. See, our faith grows in the face of it being used. So if you're in a situation right now and you're like, yeah, my faith is worn out. Don't give up. Don't give up. You're not alone. We're in it together with you. Hopefully you have a small group, a leader who's in it with you. If nothing else, Noah's in it with you and God's in it with you. So when I teach, I always have a closing statement. It's this: so what, now what? Like, I'm really not interested that you leave and you learned all these things about Noah. Like, so what? Now what do you do? What's the Monday morning effect of this? What's gonna happen different in your life tonight and tomorrow because we spent this time together learning about Noah's life? I think 3 things can happen, right? They're super simple. The first one is something we can all do right now. We can worship. See, before we leave, we're gonna sing one more song. We're gonna sing to God and we're to declare to him how thankful we are that he is a way maker, that he is a promise maker, that he is a promise keeper, that he is there, that he cares, and he can do it. And he invites us into that worship. It pleases him. Just like with Noah, we have the opportunity to do that right now. But some of you need to do more than that. Some of you are at a point where if there's a boat and God's calling you to get on, you're recognizing you're not on the boat and you need to be. That God's calling you to himself and you need to respond. You simply need to start trusting in him and say yes. If that's you, at the end of our service, we have a room right over here to my left. We have staff in the lobby. We'd love to talk to you about helping you take your next step to trusting in Jesus saying yes to him. And then finally, I think this is where most of us are in the room. I think today was an opportunity for you to just pause. and for you to sort of readjust your grip and your hold that you have on God. And maybe better said, today wasn't just a moment for you to readjust your grip on God. Maybe right now God's been readjusting his grip on you. Maybe you walked in tired and you're leaving encouraged. Maybe you walked in ready to give up and you're going to leave and keep with it one more step. Listen, my encouragement to you is to keep trusting in Jesus in your life. Let me pray for you. God, we love you. We thank you for loving us. God, we thank you that you have done everything we need to have a relationship with you. Jesus, you lived the life I failed to live. You died a death I deserved to die. And you were resurrected to prove you are who you say you are, and you can do what you say you can do. And God, we thank you. You're the same God of Noah's life and Noah's time as you are right now in our lives and our time. Would you give us the courage to respond to you first right now with worship, and then to agree with your heart and say yes to what you're calling us to. We ask it in your name, Jesus. Amen.
Will y'all stand and sing as we respond together? You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, you're working in this place. I worship you, I worship you. Let's sing Waymaker together. Waymaker, miracle work, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle work, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. You are here, you're touching every heart. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, you're healing every heart. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, you're turning lives around. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, mending every heart. I worship you, I worship you. Oh, you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. 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 Oh, that is who you are. 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 He's faithful and kind, and he's working in ways that we can't even fathom or understand or even believe if we were to know him. But he's faithful and kind to continue to do that. We can lift these words together. Let's sing this. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working.